I'm the VP Marketing at Backslash, and I'm super happy to kick off today's webinar. A few quick logistics before we dive in. If you have any question, run into any issue, just drop me a message on the chat. I'll keep an eye on it and try to answer during the webinar. If you have questions to James or for Shahar, you can use the Q&A session, and we'll make sure to answer your question during the webinar or after the webinar. So let's start it. Joining me today, we have Shahar Man, CEO of Backslash, and James Berthoty, founder of Latio Tech. Shahar, let's start with you. Do you want to present yourself, to tell us a bit?
Absolutely, Tesha. Thank you so much for having me today and for joining us, James. This is very exciting, and it is a pleasure. My name is Shahar Man, the CEO and co-founder of Backslash Security. My entire career as a head of engineering and engineering lead, and as a developer myself, I felt like code scanning, SaaS, everything around that was a complete waste of time. And that, in a way, I wanted to call the bluff on this attitude towards scanning when you just scan something in the code in order to scan it. And this is how I got the motivation to try and fix this very painful problem in the industry and came up with Backslash. Before Backslash, I was building the engineering team from the very beginning of a company called Aqua Security. I'm very proud of building the team over there in Hyderabad and in Tel Aviv. And before that, just dating myself, I had a full career with SAP, building enterprise software. And even before that, I was responsible for the IBM mainframes, while Bug 2000 was still a big deal, and I was responsible at that very particular second to make sure when mainframe goes from the second millennium to the third millennium, that no missiles are being thrown and the Earth is not being destroyed, but actually nothing happened back then. So back to normal. On a more personal note, I like the fact most of my teams were always engaged with open sources like Trivi that we came up with, Aqua Security, that we're very proud of. And on my spare time, I love to practice Ashtanga yoga, and I'm a okay chess player. That's about myself. James?
Wow. That's a fresh reminder of how you should listen to Shahar instead of me on anything. My experience is mostly in the DevOps world into DevSecOps, as that was becoming a thing. And so really had a lot of experience at mid-sized companies, at larger companies, at startups, helping companies really of all sizes do everything from SOC 2 in the cloud to automating DevOps pipelines, Kubernetes security. Really, my entire bias is like Kubernetes stuff, and everything kind of comes secondary to that. But I went from just sharing my opinions about different products and different hands-on experience I had with different tools to starting Latio just as a resource for people to help find. I don't like unbiased as much as just accurate information about what vendors do and don't do and why you would actually pick them or not. Because I think that's the core challenge in security is when you're trying to select products, it is such an overwhelming list of features that look the same at a high level. And I'm sure we'll talk about that today as well. But really the details matter a ton. And so that's what drives a lot of what I'm doing with Latio. A fun fact about me, instead of yoga, is that I was into StarCraft 2 early on and was a writer for Team Liquid. And was like a semi-professional esports person in college with it. But I made the lame decision to get into IT instead of committing to like being a StarCraft pro. So that's my fun fact.
That's cool. I didn't know that, James. Pretty cool.
Yes, that's my chess equivalent.
Cool.
Great. So let's dive into our first subject, Shift Left Awakening. At Backslash, we talk with a lot of companies that are navigating, struggling, or had enough with shifting left. It's a complex shift. Shahar and James, I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Maybe let's have you, Shahar, start.
Yeah, absolutely. Shifting left and not in politics, of course, in the IT world, security world. Maybe I'll start with a story. It was very early days in Aqua. One of my brilliant first developers later became the manager, director of one of the more code intense area of the agent. Knocked on my door and said, Shahar, you guys need to stop shitting left on us. And I was like, what? And he said, yes, we are the engineers here. We work so hard. We have so many tasks to do. And we feel like you're so intensively putting more and more stuff that is not actually coding on our plate. There's no QA anymore. You decided there's no QA discipline that should be done by the Scrum teams. There's no knowledge management. We should document whatever we do. And then later on, there's just going to be a review on that. And now also we need to do security for the AppSec team are not really doing that. It should be done as part of the CI. And it leaves me with a very few moments in the day to actually do what I'm paid for, which is writing code. So this sentiment, I think you'll hear it with every engineering team you talk these days, when things are go to the extreme and shifting left the responsibility to the engineering team. I think that's the major thing that I would say about shifting left. It depends what do you as a practice want to shift left. If you want to shift the responsibility, which we see a lot with our customers or prospects, that's a problem. You cannot just shift all the responsibility to the engineering team and say they will fix the security stuff in the right gates and we're out. Just let us know if you have any problem. It doesn't work. The main reason why it doesn't work is that I'll be very open and honest. Maybe James will not agree with me, but at the end of the day, the psychology of developers is not being security people. They don't like security. A couple of decades trying to educate developers to be more security oriented, I think we can conclude this experiment as a big failure because they have other things to do. This is not what they're paid for. So I know there have been a lot of attempts in the industry to shift left and tell that everything will be fixed by the developers. That's not working, guys. So maybe I'll give one more analogy. Think about it this way. I always give this example. Think about marathon runners, right? I was a runner. I didn't mention that. I didn't do the full marathon, just half marathons. But anyhow, when someone is preparing for a marathon, he's so obsessed about being prepared to run this very specific mileage. So he will prepare the right shoes. He will make the right practices. He'll do the long runs, the short runs, the quality runs. He will prepare for a year because he is a runner. This is how he perceives himself. However, just imagine before he goes to the marathon, let's say it's a marathon in Paris, make it nice. There's a safety guidance for everyone. They call all the marathon runners before they go, and they're so excited about started running, and they need to have this security briefing or safety briefing before the marathon. What do you think they will feel about this security briefing? They're not going to be super engaged. They'll, listen somewhat to the guidance, but they just want it to be over so they can start running, not learn about the unsafety turns that they'll have in between, because they are runners. So this is what I feel when you take it to the extreme and want developers to take over about all the security features that you have. So I'm not saying that it shouldn't be like neglected at all, and just security and developers should not be part of the solution. Absolutely, they should. Having the gates earlier in the CI is it's a super important part of the successful security program. But what we see in our customers is very different with our customers and prospects, and what we see in the request we get for a security program is very different. Sometimes taken to the extreme and just want to, someone to help us to put it on the developer's shoulders and just get rid of it. And just to conclude that, I'll share with you, we see three types of maturity levels that looking for application security solution. The first maturity level would be the firefighters that just need something to help them understand where is the fire and get it over with. The second maturity level, the ones who understand they will never be able to put out all the fires, so they need a tool to put it on the developer's shoulders and get it out of their hands, shifting left extremely, in a way, overwhelming left the developers. And the third, which is the more balanced way, I call it the awakened shift left, which means the responsibility is still within the application security team as an expert, but they need to put the right policies for the company to manifest it into the CI gates, into the developers' hands, to make it as easy as possible for them, and not just introducing more and more tools. The promise of a successful security program for the developers is to have less security issues to handle. It's not about this nice tool or the other tool. It's about getting the right evidence in front of them when they need to fix something, and have the right motivation in front of them, and not just a long laundry list of vulnerabilities they need to handle. So it was a long answer, Sesha, about how we feel about shift left today, but we feel strongly that something is changing from just shifting left to the CI to make it in a very smart way using policies.
Yeah, I think what I've learned a lot about in the last couple of weeks, especially just talking with like Chris Hughes and Tyler Shields about this recently, like there's a whole perspective on shift left that I just didn't have because I came from like DevOps, where to me, shift left was primarily scanning in pipeline early on, get results to developers as quickly as possible. But there was this whole promise behind it at the executive level that I don't think I was as aware of that we're going to save a lot of money in the process. And I think that's why when we talk about like, what is shift left? Is there a shift left awakening? What does that mean? Is it useful? I think certain aspects of shift left have failed, but other aspects of it, like you're describing, are totally still a thing. And I think it's hard because it's a nuanced thing, and everyone in marketing just wants to turn it, no offense to Sheshia, wants to turn it into like shift left is dead or shift left is the future. When the answer is like some parts of it were bad and some parts of it were good. I think shift left has proven to not be like a huge cost savings initiative, because a lot of frameworks just don't require the kinds of scanning that are there, or if they do require it, you still have like timelines to meet either way, and it's like a way to do it more than it is like a giant cost savings that's happening. And then also I see more and more companies give up on like pipeline blocking as an idea, especially in a very naive sense, where I think pipeline blocking is still good for SAST issues because, I mean, it's something you can actually fix based on new code that's getting introduced. But where it's really failed is in like SCA vulnerability scanning, where you just get all of these SCA findings, and a fix could take as little as 1 minute or as much as a whole sprint if you're doing like a major framework migration, perhaps even a whole quarter to go through it. And in those cases, you can't just block a dev's pipeline and say, let me know when you fix this next quarter, and then you're allowed to push code again. And I think that's where people are still learning. And I think the way you describe the experience is definitely correct, where most people get optimistic about what they can accomplish. They plug in an application security tool, they see like millions of results, and they quickly realize I can't do this on my own. And then they try to shove it all to the developers like you described. And then that creates a different problem of nobody knows how to fix things, how long it takes. It's a giant planning disaster unless you have a very mature developer planning team where developers have enough free time, which is a very rare thing, to ingest all of these results and prioritize them on their own. Like that's where you can't totally go to it. And I think you're right that more and more people are just looking for what's a realistic way that I can sort out the 95% false positives that are happening here and just only get things fixed that actually matter, check all my compliance boxes in the process, and actually prioritize and work with developers in a meaningful way. And that's the part of shift left that I don't want to ever go and say like shift left is dead or something, because at the end of the day, developers are the ones who fix things, and there's no way around that. And so it's important that they have ways to scan that make sense to them, that there's results in a way that makes sense to them, that they can get results quickly, and that all of that stuff is still important. It's just that it's not this instant magical transformative event like a lot of people, myself included, were very optimistic in adopting.
Great. I'm moving to the next subject because we are 15 minutes in and just one subject. So the next one is about AppSec agents. So agent solutions have gained traction. Agentless solutions have gained traction in recent years, and for good reasons. But as always, there's pros and cons. James, I'll let you start this time.
Yes. So primarily around the idea of using an agent, it really depends on the context and what we're trying to accomplish. And I think we'll talk about this more as we touch on CNAPP, so I'll leave some of that for there. But really, there's one sense in which people definitely, you cannot have an agent as the only integration method for getting code scanning results to developers. Like that was my first experience with code scanning, and it was just awful. Like you're creating more vulnerabilities trying to manage this other third-party image, integrate it into all your pipelines, make sure that all of the scan parameters are there, sometimes importing other languages to get the scanner to work for your other languages. The maintenance overhead is just too much, and it's too demanding. And the payoff for it's just very minor. Like sometimes you get slightly better results because there's an agent there that can pull in like internal artifactories or something. So it's covering this like small blind spot. But in return for that small blind spot coverage, you need to do like a huge amount of additional work. I do think that CLI options are still important for people, though, for developers to be able to run tests locally and get results quickly. But it's not in the context of getting these results. And when it comes to like agent-based solutions within this specific area, I think, again, there's pros and cons. I mean, this is why my idea of this emerging ADR stuff that's very agent-based for doing vulnerability scanning as well as protection is towards this CADR idea of like a cloud all-in-one detection response tool that's primarily for the SOC. I think that's the much more prevalent top of mind use case than for this vulnerability scanning stuff. Because it is a pain, like step one, I want visibility into my code. And if step one is deploying a Helm chart, like that's just not a great solution for anyone. It's a huge barrier to entry for a perceived minor gain. But if you couple that with ADR, that's where I think there's some more potential around, like, it's really the runtime stuff that gets me excited more than some of the prioritization capabilities.
Shahar, you're on mute.
Sorry, I absolutely agree, James. I think, coming from an agent-based company, I'm very proud of, with Aqua, we had an agent-based solution. And back then, I think it was 2016 when we started, it wasn't, we did not have the luxury of having an eBPF standard way to build an agent. And it takes, 4 or 5 years to any company to build and stabilize an enterprise-grade agents, because there's so many ways to deploy it. The landscape changes from customer to customer. The people who deploy it are deploying it different way, whether it's, Kubernetes, daemon set, whatever. And agents, even eBPF today, are not playing always so nicely with each other. So, having on the same Kubernetes cluster a few eBPF-based agents probably not be a great idea, or you'll need to handle some collisions, or even to choose the right one. So for me, I pretty much agree that doing pure AppSec using agents, that's a lot of overhead for a very small gain. So I think that's not going to be the winner for this one. Agents make sense when runtime is being protected. If you look at or monitored, if you look at Datadog, Aqua, Sentinel-1, this type of company, it makes a lot of sense to have an agent to stop attacks in runtime. But just getting more signals for developers, maybe a little bit better, and not always, by the way, because there's also issues of how many coverage you get in the runtime footage that you happen to run in this particular session. But we hear it a lot that the operational overhead of having another agent just for AppSec is a no-go for having this type of solution. And I think that there's also a big leap these days with how static code analysis is being addressed. There are a lot of opportunities in this space because of how the code is being understood, digested in modern languages with other ways of understanding code than just the control flows of the 10, 20 years old companies that have done that for the last a couple of decades. So I think that the gap between there is very small, and this is why I think agents should be exclusively used for runtime protection, whether it's ADR or monitoring, etc.
Yeah, to me, it all goes back to the Sneak Sysdig partnership. Was like the original sort of Sysdig gives accidentally useful telemetry for the code scanning side of things, but it's not the prime. No one's like deploying a CNAPP in their Kubernetes workload just to get this sort of like vulnerability visibility thing.
Right.
Let's jump into the next subject, ASPM versus code security. The AppSec landscape is evolving rapidly, and we see ASPM solution versus code security, application security ones. Could you help us sort through the differences and where each one fits? Maybe Shahar, let's start.
Yeah, sure. So in a nutshell, when we started, I guess a couple of years ago, looking into ASPM, it actually evolved very differently than how we expected it to go. And in a way, we thought that it's going to be a very self-sufficient category, just like CSPM, where you don't need anything else. You want to get your cloud posture, you get the CSPM tools, you get it right there. You see the findings, you see a very nice posture of your infrastructure in the cloud. So this is what we thought it's going to evolve for ASPM. But as it happened, it kind of moved into what used to be ASOC. So like an orchestration solution on top of your existing application security software or open sources that you happen to use. And this aggregation method, I guess it's useful for a lot of executive decisions or scale, etc. And when you're happy with your existing scanning solution for SAST and SCA, but I think it misses the opportunity in 2024 to do things fundamentally different with technology, understanding the code differently, understanding how the code is being referred to and analyzed, and can bring very accurate security results these days, and not just by aggregating them outside of the code solution and adding some contextual information. So in a way, when you're breaking out from the code and taking the raw vulnerability outside and try to add context, you're actually losing context, because most of the things you need to get the deep finding and deep understanding and get evidence to your developers are at the code level. And instead of looking into the code with AI models and the opportunities that modern languages provide, we just take it away from there and try to slice and dice it in a nice, better user interface, better experience. But the results, if the raw results are not good enough, so I guess the end results cannot be great. That's the overall feeling that we have towards ASPM.
Yeah, there's definitely aspects there that I agree and disagree with. I have the freedom to rage against the Gartner definition of ASPM, which I think is exactly this ASOC thing that you're describing, where to me, it's just, I don't know how many acronyms Gartner can come up with for vulnerability management, but like they're going to do their best to create like 16 new ones. Like it's just vulnerability management for application security vulnerabilities, the way that they describe it. And I think that's definitely half the market and why it's so confusing for so many people. And I agree that all of those companies have tremendous challenges trying to enhance low quality data from third-party providers. Like if you're using one of these legacy AppSec tools, and I'll be kind and not like start naming them, but if you're using them and ASPM is ingesting those results, like they're gonna it's like garbage in, garbage out. Like there's not a lot you can do with that. On the contrary, I do still think there's hope for this like all-in-one scanner vision of ASPM, and that's why I think it just comes down to your preferences, where the reality of a business budget hits, and this gets at the CNAPP thing too, where as CNAPP and ASPM continue to like overlap on these high-level details, is there really a market for a standalone all-in-one application focused scanner thing, as opposed to something that's really focused in on the code level that really complements well a CNAPP vision? I think that question has yet to be settled, but I think that's the primary difference that I see with ASPM, where it's either going to work as a standalone product because CNAPPs are too bad at it, or CNAPPs are good enough at it and people need to augment the missing pieces of it.
And I think it's a great segue to the next topic, which is CNAPP and code security. So I'll let you just continue on that topic.
Yeah, so I made this graph just to try to be helpful on this is how I view, like, from left to right, CNAPPs will say at a high level they do every single one of these things. And it's even hard. I tried to put the note in red, but like also low, that I am not saying that all of the providers on this slide are equally as good as all the others on each of these things. It's just more from a raw feature perspective. We can see that CNAPPs continue to sort of like claw their way left with these very basic functionalities. And this overlap with ASPM providers is the big question mark is, do you care if your ASPM has good container and IAC scanning, but your CNAPP also has good enough container and IAC scanning? It's that awkward overlap where these things are sort of dipping into each other. And that's where I think, I'm assuming I'll agree with Shahar, that like Backslash in particular, in this SAST plus SCA position, like these are the missing aspects from most CNAPPs. Like everyone would agree with those being the two features that are the least common, and where they do exist, it's like laughably bad and unusable. And so that's why I think as a CNAPP complement, something that's focused on code is definitely like a no-brainer sort of complementary solution to it.
Shahar, any thoughts?
Yeah, maybe just quickly, you know, we've been there from the moment CNAPP was established. It always been like a monster type of category that it was hard to understand its limits and definition to the borders. For me, it's not only about whether you're in cloud native technology or not, it's about whether you're looking into the infrastructure or the application. So trying to get to say that application security is part of CNAPP, in that sense, for me, it kind of blur the very defined line between the infrastructure, which is the VMs, the containers, serverless, whatever you're running the application, versus the code itself, the business logic of the first party of logic that you deploy on top. And this is something that needs very special expertise in order to get it right. On the other hand, AppSec is much bigger than the cloud category, because there's a huge market for application security needs that is not only related to cloud native categories. But I agree with James that we'll need to see how that evolves. But I agree that still yet to be defined this 1 + 1 = 3 scenario between a code security and a cloud security. And I think all the parts of the puzzles are there to make it happen. Like get a very good understanding of code attack flows and combine them with insights from the CNAPP attack flow. Let's say you have an S3 bucket that is open, but this code that associated with it has an open source package that is being manipulated by the application code with a SQL injection. So this long attack path from infrastructure to AppSec is something that can minimize the view of the enterprises to the attacker view. This is something I truly believe in.
So let's, we're just at the end of the webinar. Let's still just a minute. And I would love to kind of tie everything with Backslash. Can you tell us really quickly, Shahar, about how everything we talked about goes with Backslash?
Yeah, I think we're out of time, so I would not go very deeply into Backslash. Of course, all the materials are out there, but Backslash is truly trying to get a very new technology to understand code, and this is how we want to push the traditional boundaries of SAST and SEA that you know into something very elegant of technology that understand modern application. Maybe I'll leave you with one picture, if I may just share my screen. Sasha, just, yeah, so in order to get a great AppSec results these days, the analysis of the code should be very visible. This is a typical juice shop application and how Backslash digested it into the open source packages. And of course, behind the scenes, there's a dimension of the first party code analysis and all the issues inside. And this gives us once we understand the application this way, it gives us a lot of flexibility with creating new features, like understanding, if I'll take this package, for example, the JSON web token, you can see I can create immediately an evidence for the developer. This is reachable and can be used against us, unlike other packages that are not reachable. And I can simulate the upgrade instead of let the developers try and try all the possible versions. I can simulate the best version they can use and say, guys, don't go for 4.0 to 4.1 because you'll still have the same amount of vulnerabilities in this transitive way of packages. And this is the kind of features that developers appreciate because it's very tangible. It saves time rather than just, list a long list of vulnerabilities. That's the way Backslash want to go looking at the code.
Thank you very much, Shahar. Thank you very much, James. Sorry for going a bit over. I know we don't have time for Q&A, so if you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A and I'll make sure to reply to you by email. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sasha. Bye. Thank you,
Bye.
James.
Yep. See you.